Okay, I'm going to start with a couple of questions, and feel free to raise your hand, maybe nod your head vigorously, or if you want to make me feel at home, maybe just a British slight raise of the eyebrow, and I'll try and pick it out. So, have you ever sat through a MongoDB presentation or another technical presentation, or maybe gone through a tutorial and thought, well, that was all very interesting, but I'm not building a to-do list app, so this doesn't apply to me. Or maybe you've ported an application over from Oracle to MongoDB and then realized the performance hasn't got any better. I was expecting more from MongoDB. Or maybe you've got an application that you're thinking of moving to MongoDB and you can think of 2 or 3 different ways of modeling the data, but you can't figure out which one is going to be the best for your application. So for all of those, if any of those strike a chord, then that is what our design reviews are around. So this is a program where we help you be successful with MongoDB with your project. And that's going to be the focus of the session today, to describe those. So to give a customer perspective on design reviews, Antoine Speller from Wells Fargo is going to be presenting. So he's not with us today because he couldn't travel, but we've got a video that we're going to play through. So he's going to give the customer experience of going through a design review. I'm Andrew Morgan. I've been with MongoDB about 9 years, and I had several years at Oracle as part of the MySQL team before that. So what we're going to cover today, really, is just describing what design reviews are, why you benefit from them, if you're going to have one, how to prepare for them. So what is a design review? A design review is where we will sit down with you for 45 minutes or an hour, and by you I mean an individual designer or developer, an individual architect, or maybe a small team that's all working on the same project. And the session is going to be a mixture of training and consultancy, but it's all going to be based around using your application as the use case. So what we'll very often do is we'll understand your application and we'll work with you interactively during that session to actually make some recommendations about what your schema might look like. And so you leave that knowing more about MongoDB and having a good start on being successful with MongoDB for your project. So why do we do these data model focused design reviews at all? So before I move on to the next slide, I'm going to give an apology, and that is that this event, there's a lot of information on generative AI. And there's nothing in my session which is specific to Gen AI. And to be honest, I felt a little bit left out. So I may have overdone the use of ChatGPT generating images. So why do we do this data modeling and design reviews? So let's contrast with the relational database. A lot of people may have learned at university how to come up with a good schema for a relational database. And it's almost a mechanical process. You take your logical data model and you apply the third normalized form rules that Edgar Codd invented in 1970. So almost 55 years ago. And you don't really need to understand how your application is going to use that data. And that's one of the beauties of relational databases. You just need to understand the data, then later on you run some queries and realize you need some extra indexes, and so you add those. MongoDB is quite different. So you need to understand everything you do from a relational database in terms of understanding your logical data model. But with MongoDB, you've got lots of different ways that you can choose to model the data in your physical MongoDB schema. The fact that MongoDB supports embedded documents, it supports arrays, it's got polymorphism with optional fields, means that you can give me a logical data model, I can come up with 5 or 6 different MongoDB schemas that are going to work with that. But the schema that you actually want to use is the one that's tuned to the way that your application is actually going to use that data. So unlike a relational database where we come up with a generic model, with MongoDB, we really want to understand what your application is doing. So we can figure out what your top queries are. Let's have a schema that is really going to work for those queries. And so this is why we have the data model focused design reviews. the developer advocates that are running those, we've all got many experiences of working with relational databases as well as document and object databases. So, as a user of MongoDB or as a customer, what do you gain from a design review? The most immediate benefit is actually for your project or your application that you're working on at the moment. If we can help you come up with a good optimized schema, your application is going to be faster. You're going to have lower latency. If there's a UI, people are going to see less of a lag when they click on buttons. If you think your application is going to have to scale out, either now or in the future, we can make sure that your schema is organized for that, so that we can come up with a good sharding key, and you'll be able to shard in the future. And finally, this is linked to being faster. If we can come up with a schema which means the database has to do less work for each of your application operations, it means you're going to need smaller machines. You're going to use less power. So it's good for the planet and good for your budget. And perhaps just as importantly, you learn stuff during those reviews. We don't just sit there in silence, listen to you, and then say, this is your schema. We'll discuss with you why we're making the different recommendations that we do. And the idea is when you're working on another project in the future, you can reuse those ideas. And if something changes with your current application, you know, actually that changes the assumptions that we made. So I'm going to tweak the data model. So it's a mixture, like I say, of consultancy to help your application be successful, but also upskilling you using your application as the use case. So why do we do this? We don't charge for this program. So in a way, it's free training, it's free consultancy. So why do we do that? The overriding thing is we want your project to be successful. If you start with MongoDB and you don't have a good time with MongoDB, you're going to move on to something else. That's not good for us. So we don't want that to happen. It's a bit of a cliche that companies say, if you have a bad experience, tell us. If you have a great experience, tell your friends. The reality is you're going to tell your friends and colleagues regardless. So we want you to be really happy using MongoDB, be really successful using MongoDB. So you go and tell your colleagues and friends, and we kind of get this sort of like a self-sustaining perpetual motion of more and more projects moving on because people are having a good experience. And also, we want to be training up a whole army of developers and architects who are really skilled at using MongoDB. We want you to be able to move on to your next project and know sort of, yeah, I know MongoDB is going to be a good fit for this. I know I've got the skills to do it. So what happens? Everyone in the team maybe have a slightly different approach to this, but this is the general approach we do. The first step is you've got to understand your application. So remember, with a relational database, you don't really care how you're going to use the data. With MongoDB, you very much do. So if you've got a user interface, if you're doing microservices where you've got defined API endpoints, understanding those is going to tell you how you're going to query the data. How much data you're going to store, how frequently you're going to have to run queries, etc. That's all invaluable stuff. Just like a relational database, we care about relationships. And sometimes people think that MongoDB, NoSQL, we don't care about relationships. In fact, with MongoDB, you probably care about relationships more than you do with a relational database. Because with a relational database, you've only got one way of modeling that relationship. With MongoDB, you've got several ways. So we need to understand, is it one-to-one? Is it one-to-many? Is it many-to-many? But one of the big differences is when we say many, we care what you mean by many. So if you're saying it's 1 to 10, then that's a good hint. Okay, we could embed that in an array. If it's 1 to 10,000, then that array is probably going to get too big. So we're going to be probing and asking questions about that as we go through the design review. And then finally, sometimes we'll come up with a really simple schema, because maybe it's a departmental application, doesn't have a huge amount of data, doesn't have a huge workload, and so we keep a really nice, simple schema. Other times you want to scale, you want to get high performance. We've got a whole load of design patterns that can be applied. And I'm not going to go through those. You'll see we've got more sessions coming later in the day, and we'll go into that in a lot more detail. So if you do book a design review, how should you prepare? Understanding your business requirements. So what is expected of your application, your microservice, whatever it may be. So what features do you need to support? What query rates do you need to support? What volume of data? If your application is going to have a UI, then if you've got some wireframes of that UI, then that's brilliant. We can work from that because that's going to give us big hints. If I can see 5 pieces of information on the same web page, that's a big hint that it would be good to be able to efficiently fetch all 5 pieces of data in one go. If you're implementing a microservice, hopefully you've got a definition of the API endpoints you need to support. So bring those definitions along so we can see what data you're querying and what keys you're using to query the data. Yeah, how many queries you've got to run, what volume of data, and if you've got any kind of description of what your data looks like, whether it be an old relational schema, an ERD, whatever you have, or if you're a bit further along, maybe you've actually got some MongoDB documents, so bring those along. But the other thing I'd say about this is don't be too paranoid about preparing this information, because we can just whiteboard it in the sessions as well, but just have this information in your head. Some of the tools we use during the reviews, I should have pointed out there's 2 main types of design reviews we do. The first is face-to-face ones that we do at an event like this. And so I'll have some instructions later at the end about how you can get set up with one of these. But when we're at an event, we like to get around a whiteboard so that you and we can both start scribbling on the board and come up with some good designs. We also do ad hoc ones where we'll just schedule a Zoom or a Teams or a WebEx call, and we'll do it online. When we do that, I typically use the MongoDB Compass tool, and we'll actually create some documents actually in the review. And then we can add some indexes, run the explain plans, and see that the queries that you say need to be optimized, we can see that they are actually running efficiently. So what should happen after a design review? One of the most common things is people will actually go away and produce a proof of concept. So in the review, we've come up with what theoretically should be a good schema, and we believe will perform well. We've looked at an explain plan and seen that, yeah, the queries are using the indexes. All's good. But nothing beats actually creating a proof of concept, running some benchmarks, and just building up the confidence that you are actually going to see the performance and functionality you need. And then sometimes one of the trickier things is go back and refine some of the business requirements. Through this process, you may realize that while some of the requirements you've been given are possible, they're actually very expensive to implement. So perhaps you want to go back to the product owners and say, do you really need this feature? Because if you do, it's going to add, I don't know, like say 50% to your CPU usage. Do you really want it? But I've been talking for too much, and this is really meant to be about hearing from someone who's been through the process themselves. And so hopefully we will hear from Antoine from Wells Fargo.
Hi, my name is Antoine Speller from Wells Fargo. Today I wanted to talk about our design review sessions with Mongo. They have been excellent, and we're glad that we signed up for them. As we look to add a new product to our mobile app called LifeSync, you may have heard of it or even seen the commercials. This new product was going to help enhance our customer lives. It was going to help them add goals and track those goals over a certain amount of time. As you can see, we took great detail in designing these screens. We made sure that the data was together, that needed to be together, and we put some great design into our UI. Now this is backed up by our API that runs it in the back end. And when we thought about all the users that was going to use our application, over 35 million, we wanted to ensure that our application was going to run quickly and effectively, and that it was going to be able to scale. So a little bit of background about the project that we wanted to review with the Mongo team. We have a product and we have product changes. And what we wanted to review with Mongo was our product changes API. It was going to track all the changes that were done to our product. So what we decided to do was to go with two collections. One of those collections being a product collection, which whenever the user enters the data, it is stored in our product collection. And then from there, any changes that take place will go to our product changes collection. And this includes create, update, delete, or what have you. And the way that we decided to do this was interesting. And we sought the help of Mongo to help us with that. Now, in our change API, in our collection, we have two schemas. A schema A that is used to query by date, owner of products, and or actions. So basically that's what the user are going to be doing the majority of the time. So we have a particular schema in this collection. We'll call it schema A, but that is our queryable data. And then we have schema B. This is used to have a snapshot of what the user queried. And this is only used when the user clicks on that particular data. It's not requested often. Now, the benefits of the Mongo Design Review are many, but I'll just give you a few. It basically helped us reinforce our new way of thinking. We wanted to make sure that our old way of thinking, relational, did not creep back into our current design. We had to be very cognizant that we stored the data together. And this allowed us to make a lot of design decisions and rework some things to store the data together. And one of the things we were a little concerned about was redundant data. As you know, in Mongo, a little redundant data is not that bad. It just depends. And it really worked out well. We was able to also review the best design practices and schema designs and indexing and querying with the Mongo team to make sure our performance was optimized. The next thing we wanted to do is make sure that this application could scale horizontally. So we considered the sharding capabilities of our design as well. And then also we just wanted a second set of eyes. You know, it's always good to seek wise counsel. So who better to seek wise counsel from Mongo, the team that created Mongo itself. So we wanted a second set of eyes, and that was awesome. And then the next thing we wanted to do was leverage the previous reviews that the Mongo team. You can imagine that they've done many of reviews with many different companies from different sectors of the industry, and to get them to look at our product and bring all of their experience to the table was paramount. And that was what we really was seeking as well. The experience was great. It allowed us to learn how to gather the data. It made sure that we was looking at everything. We had to look at our workloads. We had to look at our UI. We had to make sure that we had everything we needed to design this database correctly. And preparing for the design review was great because we were able to go through what we have already gathered, and that gave us confidence that we were on the right track. The design review did not take that long. It was really just over an hour, and it worked out well. And then it was very collaborative and interactive. That's one of the things that I like. We was able to ask questions. They were able to ask questions to us. We understood each other. And it was really a joint effort, and it worked out great. And it was a great learning opportunity because as we mature in this space, in the Mongo space, we're able to take this to other areas of our company. And as they're already looking at our product LifeSync and how successful it is, we have other departments coming to us and say, hey, how did you do that? And they're wanting to jump on board and try Mongo. It's very infectious right now because it's working out very well. So it was a great learning opportunity for us. And then it was a great partnership. Mongo followed up with us, make sure that everything was going well. And they wanted to make sure that we were successful because obviously that helps them as well. So I really recommend to sign up for a Mongo review session. Thank you.
Okay, so just to cover a couple of things that Antoine covered there about the data modeling we did. He mentioned storing data that's queried together in the database. We realized that when he had those two different schemas in the same collection where he had the summary of the changes and then the details of each change, nowhere did the application fetch those two pieces of data together. You saw the summary, then you clicked on a link and you fetched the details. So that meant that there was no advantage to storing the details and the summaries together. When we looked at the cardinality, so how many changes could there be for an individual product? It looked like it was typically somewhere between 1 and 15 changes. So that meant embedding all of those events, those change summaries within a single document in an array, we weren't going to have a huge array. And so that was a good idea. So those were the two main things I think they got from the reviews from a technical perspective. Another thing I'll mention is that just with Wells Fargo, we've done more than 100 design reviews in a space of about a year. So this is, I guess, a sign that they're actually finding them useful within the company because they're encouraging other project teams to take advantage of the program as well. So a final bit of when design reviews can go wrong. So what are mistakes that can be made such that they're not going to be as effective? And so this one, like ChatGPT, really did its worst. And I advise people not to focus too much on the faces because you could get nightmares from some of those. But when things can go wrong, people not understanding the non-functional requirements. And probably the most common instance of this is a developer is told you've got to develop this microservice. You've got to implement these endpoints. But what they're not being told is which of these endpoints is going to be called most frequently, how often it's going to be called. So in a way, that means we don't know actually what we want to optimize the schema for. So sometimes development teams will have to go back up the product chain a bit and say, yeah, I know you just gave me the spec for the microservice, but give me a bit more business information. How often is this going to be called, etc. Sometimes people can get carried away when they draw a picture of a UI. Let's make it so we can sort on every single column, that we can have filters on any of 50 different attributes, where we can have not just the next page, get me the first page, next page, last page, and page number 32. And those are all possible, but just like with any other database, they're going to be expensive to implement at runtime. And so sometimes people will actually have the design review and then realize, actually, I'm going to push back a bit and see how much benefit does the company really get from implementing that feature. And then the other final thing is we'll come up with a really cool idea and say, Atlas has a brilliant feature that lets you do this. And then, sorry, we can't use Atlas. So it's really like if you work for a big company especially, go into the review knowing what's supported in the company. So we actually know which features you're able to use. And then the final one is people can leave it too late to have the design review. So you're a week away from production and you'd like to get a little bit more performance. You have a design review. We come up with a bunch of recommendations and you say, yeah, they sound great, but we go live in a week. It's too late to do those. So my message would be, it's never too early to have a design review. So even if you haven't made the decision yet to go with MongoDB, have a design review, figure out the art of the possible, and then in 3 months' time when you've implemented something, come back and have another one, and we'll do some tuning, etc. I want to mention some related sessions. You've sat through this one. The next one is over in the Central Park stage, and Rick's going to be talking about his experience of moving from relational to NoSQL. And Rick's a really entertaining speaker, so you'll enjoy that. Daniel is going to be talking a lot more about data modeling with MongoDB. Some of those design patterns I mentioned. Asya is going to be giving a master class on indexes. And then Graham, towards the end of the day, is going to be doing a pop quiz to see what you've learned about optimization. But the key thing for all of these is they're really aimed at developers and getting developers productive. So how do you get a design review? We are running design reviews at this event. And so at least yesterday, there were still a couple of free slots. And so if you're interested, go to the Ask the Expert booths and have a chat with them. Whenever we run, so we run events all over the country and all over the world. So we have .local events like today. We have what we call MongoDB Developer Days. So go to our events page, look when there's one coming up near you, and we always run design reviews at those. And also, if you do have a customer success manager, an account exec with MongoDB, speak with them to see whether we can set up a virtual one over Zoom. So with that, we've got like 2 minutes left, so any quick questions? No. Okay. Do you have a question? Oh, we've got a microphone here. Yeah.
Question?
What would be, if we currently use, say, HBase with time series data, and we want to migrate to MongoDB, what would be the points we should consider? What would be the caveats and how easy it would be to migrate?
Yeah, so that's a big topic, but MongoDB does have support for time series collections. And so I think that would be a great example of where a design review would be worthwhile. So we can actually sit down, see what you're using HBase for, and figure out, okay, if I was implementing that in MongoDB, this is how I would do it. So I think that would be a great candidate for a review. That's a question.
Hi, my name is Veera. Can you explain about the joins, how many collections we can be able to join in MongoDB?
Okay.
And another thing is the indexes, how how many indexes we can create in a collection.
So what I would say is talking about joins. You could get a taste with Rick, Daniel's session, because in general we try and reduce the number of joins you do with MongoDB. They're fully supported and there's good use cases for doing them, but we try and optimize them out as much as possible. For indexes, the TLDR, 64 indexes on a collection, but go to Asya's collection and you'll learn a load about indexes.
All right, thank you so much, Andrew, for that amazing session. Folks, before we wrap up, if everyone could help Andrew by leaving some feedback in the MongoDB.local app, that would be very appreciated and very useful for us to understand how to improve our sessions going forward. That was an excellent session. Thank you so much for so much useful advice, and I hope everyone here is going to book a MongoDB session with the team here.
Yeah. If there's any other questions, I'll step off to the side of the stage here, so yeah, just come up.
Great. We now have a 10-minute break until our next session, so we'll see you all for the next one.